guess I'm here. And yeah, so let me just quickly turn down the music. What you were hearing was the Warhammer Dawn of War music. And of course, this is gonna be. I have been trying so hard to set this up. It's so goddamn horrible. I guess for some reason Streamlabs just doesn't, stream to Twitch. Everything just broke. So next time we will definitely um, switch to OBS, and then I'm not gonna pay for that service anymore because I think it's just not worth it. And of course, today, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna do something crazy, and this is gonna be an awesome journey. And yeah, so let's do a YouTube intro. Okay, for the YouTube intro, we're gonna be like, okay, hang on. I think for my editor, I should make the camera look bigger, just so that he can, do that. Okay, let's do this. Welcome, people, to yeah. Okay. Cool. Again. What's up, guys? Today we were on a journey. The journey to the Warhammer world. I'm a newbie. I know nothing about this world. Completely zero, by the way. Well, not really zero, because I played the Warhammer 40k Dawn of War game, and that's the best. Well, I was so young back then. I didn't know what the hell was going on in the storyline. I just saw, oh, big man, oh, big suit, good one. Yeah. So because of that, I asked on Reddit on which place should I start following the lore of Warhammer 40k, and they told me to look for Lewitton. And Lewitton, and I looked it up. So basically, he has this list. So basically, he has this list. This playlist of his contains, I don't know, 155 videos, over 14 million views, and I double check on the length itself. Look at that. Total length of playlist: 5 days, 11 hours, 59 minutes, and 33 seconds. Holy crap. So in order to watch all of this, we're gonna spend a lot of time. So we're not gonna do that, but I hope to get just enough information so that I can, start get into the Warhammer series. So let's actually work on it. So first up, I think the first video that we're gonna do is, the first one, I guess. What the F is Warhammer 40k explained, full beginner's guide, every major faction's lore / history. 5 years ago, by the way. There's another one in 9 years ago. Wow. So it's been around for a long time. So just do a quick sound check just before I continue the stream, just to be sure everything is working great. Every major faction's lore / history. 5 years ago, by the way. There's another one in 9 years ago. Wow. Okay, that sounds good to me. So let's actually go for it. And of course, if you guys like what I'm doing, like me, then please make sure to subscribe. Thank you. So let's actually go over it. Okay, that was a bit too loud, so I gotta turn it down. In the grim darkness of the far future, there's only war. Hey Frank, what's up? Welcome to the stream. I am going forward with the Warhammer series, and by the way, I am totally a noob. So, oh wait, I forgot to turn off the music. Yeah, totally a noob. I have no idea what's going on in the Warhammer series. I just read it, and this is what I got. Loetin playlist. So we're gonna try to watch as many videos as we can. But yeah, let's go. I'm excited. I'm proud man, the Carrion Lord, from whom 1,000 souls die every day. Human blood, human flesh, the stuff of which the Imperium is made. Forget the promise of progress and standing, for there is no peace among the stars. I couldn't read it. Primer.
Welcome to the first in my series of primers focused on the universe of Warhammer 40,000. If you're watching this, you may well be brand new to the all-encompassing hobby we call 40k. But what is it? What's it all about, and why should you consider looking into it any further? Well, for one reason, in recent times, people's appetites have been reawakened to highly immersive TV series like Game of Thrones, or movie franchises with a decent backstory. 40k goes considerably far beyond these examples. It is one of the biggest miniature wargames in the world, and features an ever-evolving story that expands in written text, video games, and of course its original and arguably most important feature, the miniatures and its tabletop game. It is created and owned by Games Workshop, a UK-based company producing tabletop games and associated materials. Now, I will cover elements of 40k as briefly as I can today, but I won't skimp on detail just for the sake of time. It's as to the point as I can make it, but if you want to know more about specifics, here on my channel I've covered in detail some of the core background areas of the game, which is continuing to expand. I'll also be continuing to produce these short primers to the world of 40k, and I'll also be continuing to make the longer form content which is featured regularly here on the channel.
Okay.
Often referred to by those already consumed by Warhammer 40,000 as the hobby.
Okay, this might sound like a cop-out question, but what's the difference between like the original Warhammer and 40k? Is it like a sequel, a brand new world? Is it the same thing? They just different name? Because to be honest, 40k sounds way cooler than, you know, just Warhammer. But yeah. But I think he will go into it later on. I think from my suspicion, I think 40k just means like, oh, it's a different world, different story and stuff.
40k is not one thing to one person. It is a highly detailed narrative spanning multiple empires, from world-ending galactic campaigns to lowly individual soldier stories. It is a series of usually middle-of-the-road video games with a few standout gems. It's a hobby of addictive miniature painting and crafting, and it is a tabletop wargame now established for over 30 years. It has spawned a variety of smaller games designed to be played without acquiring a huge army, games like Space Hulk, Necromunda and Kill Team, and these often require only say 6 to 10 pieces per side and are very accessible for new players, whereas standard Warhammer 40,000 tabletop may require larger armies with many pieces. Now, before we come to the lore, it is worth looking at the original tabletop game, as this will give you a better understanding of just everything about it. If you've never seen or encountered a tabletop game, this is not important, it's actually very simple. Usually 2 players will engage in a battle laid out on a table at your home or a gaming venue. The area of play will be set with terrain pieces, often crafted and painted by the players.
And this looks absolutely so cool. Like, look at the details. Look at that. Damn. Is this why people say it's a very expensive hobby?
And they will alternate turns moving their miniature soldiers or vehicles, and will resolve engagements through random dice rolls according to specific rules and combinations of preset unit stats. There may or may not be a mission for one side to achieve, and these games can be highly strict or open to player interpretations. Players will usually paint their miniature soldiers for use on the battlefield, and these can be in a variety of factional designs and colours. Some people prefer their involvement in 40k to be focused entirely on this hobby of painting, designing and modifying these miniature units, and this part of 40k can be just as awkward.
Oh, this one looks so cool. What's this faction? This one's so cool. That reminds me of Protoss in StarCraft. I think that's the term. And also, just do a sound check just to be sure everything is okay.
Or consuming as the law or the table.
Doing a sound check. That reminds me of Protoss in StarCraft. I think that's the term. And also, just do a sound check just to be sure everything is okay.
Or consuming as the law.
Okay, the sound check is absolutely fine. Let's actually continue. It's amazing so far.
Top. Some may choose to split their time between each part or devote all their hobby time to one piece of the whole 40k hobby, be that the lore, tabletop, or the painting.
So I know this. This is Space Marine. Well, I know it because of the game. And again, I'm gonna put up a lot of StarCraft reference here. I think it looks very similar to the terrain in StarCraft.
Designing element. Now comes the challenge for me, summarizing 40k. So Warhammer 40,000 is set in the distant future, a future beset by galactic war from a skirmishing city turf war level through to planetary conquest and system-wide campaigns fought through its space and planets. It is far more pessimistic than most other deep lore universes and also regularly borders on what you would describe as space horror.
So does it have magic in it? It looks like it has magic in it. I'm not sure. It feels like it.
Now 40k is primarily focused around humanity, which has through many thousands of years achieved an unimaginable level of technology, and then lost the majority of this zenith through a devastating war. Humanity after this ancient war was left broken and fragmented across the galaxy. It would be later reunified by one godlike individual known as the Emperor of Man, and he would set in motion the new order for mankind known as the Imperium of Man. But a devastating civil war known as the Horus Heresy would befall mankind before the Emperor could complete his goals for humanity, and he would instead now become a living corpse enshrined on Earth or Terra. Humanity would become shattered by this civil war, and after a slow, painful recovery, it has become for the longest time a stagnant civilization. Suffocating under its own bureaucracy, the Imperium has begun making the smallest steps toward advancement in the most recent days of its history, but it still stands as a strange juxtaposition of.
I love the Gothic style of it. The Gothic. It's a weird mix between technology and somewhat medieval in a way. It's okay. I would like to play because I really like the design of it.
Ancient tech that is beyond the comprehension of many of its citizens, it is a weak and precarious civilization simultaneously able to wield immense military power. Humanity itself, through thousands of years of conflict with alien races who are more often than not excessively hostile, has become a highly xenophobic race. It views almost all other races as needing to be exterminated and has almost no morals or ethics as to how this is to be achieved. The galaxy-spanning empire of humanity is essentially a totalitarian state that worships the Emperor of Man. The Imperium of Man has large, if not complete, control over its citizens, including many aspects of their lives, economy, social life, education, private lives, science, and indoctrination into its ideology. Any who are not seen to be a follower of the Emperor may and will be persecuted as heretics, and this is often largely open to interpretation and leads to large-scale abuses of power.
Okay. Before we continue, I'm gonna make a guess. I think this is still going back to the whole religion and stuff. Religion cause belief cause abuse of power cause war, and because human, which in this world becomes xenophobe, they have xenophobia, meaning they don't like aliens, which also means they will attack another planet. That doesn't sound right. Why would you do that?
And executions. The Imperium uses this deeply entrenched worship and imperial ideology to control and mobilize mass populations of its citizenry for its armies like the Imperial Guard and Imperial Fleet. It also will utilize its citizens to fulfill whatever role is needed. These roles can, and often are, fairly unpleasant, especially when the rule of law is often severe and absolute. Humanity also wields in its arsenal the Emperor's greatest gift, the military sledgehammer known as the Imperial Astartes. These are the iconic Space Marines, genetically enhanced superhuman warriors who represent the pinnacle of human modification and military power. Their forces have access to some of the most powerful weapons and force multipliers humanity wields. Much of this tech is ancient and requires careful care and repair by specialists dedicated to retaining this critical knowledge. But as powerful as humanity,
Okay, so for what I understand, the Space Marines and the Imperial, they are allies because I guess they're still humans. But the Space Marines is the genetically modified version of a human with religious power thrown into it. I think that's how I understand it.
is, even with its small progression in its most recent times, it still stands on the edge of annihilation by various alien races or entities. Humanity somehow has survived to this point despite being on an almost permanent risk of complete destruction and forced extinction. Within the lore, this has nearly happened on multiple occasions, and what is left of humanity now in the Imperium of Man are the remnants of those survivors, a highly ignorant, fearful people in a fairly constant state of decay where critical technological information is often lost.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, other alien races invaded the human race, which then caused the extinction of human. That's why that's why the humans are so afraid of them, and then that's why they start attacking them instead, going on the offense. Okay, that makes more sense now.
The Imperium and humanity's primary goals are to locate lost technology from the zenith period of mankind, known as the Dark Age of Technology, otherwise referred to as the Golden Age. It also focuses upon the continued defense and expansion of its territories, and of course the extermination of all alien races, known collectively as the Xenos.
Xenos.
Because humanity has become so violently and ignorantly xenophobic in the far future, it also has no qualms about committing planetary levels of genocide. If you're
Makes
not
sense.
human and don't worship the Emperor, then you are the enemy, a heretic, and must be exterminated. Diplomacy is almost not a thing for the Imperium, and the usual recourse is to just shoot on sight. In fairness though, there was a time where humanity had attempted a more diplomatic approach, but this over time has just disintegrated, with most of its contact with aliens resulting in some kind of conflict. It now simply believes all other life must be extinguished, or at the very least dominated and enslaved for work or experimentation. These cases are usually quite rare. There are 6 other races that are seen as the enemies of humanity. Any of these factions can be played by you within the tabletop game of 40k or models for collecting and painting. Some players will dedicate themselves in.
So I know there are the orcs. I think it's very prominent throughout like the Warhammer franchise. And then I know there is a race where almost skeleton-y, like green. They are green with a skeleton kind of suit. So I know those two. And of course the Imperial and Space Marine, even though they are the same, but they are considered as 2 factions, I think.
Entirely to one faction, building it up, fleshing it out to the limit of their model making ability, and others may have multiple armies of different factions.
Oh yeah, this is the one. The Necrons. Huh.
The Necrons are a very ancient race, strange creatures that appear like metallic skeletons. They're actually formed of living metal. They span the galaxy and are in a continuing state of awakening from their tombs after many thousands of years of sleep. They seek to rebuild their empire and dominate the galaxy. One of their key abilities is that of reanimation. They can reassemble themselves after death and fight on. They're also generally mindless automatons. How this came to be is another story. Now, Games Workshop has seen fit to recently rename some of its units, largely it seems for legal reasons, but since forever this faction has been known as the Eldar. More recently it is known as the Eldari, but basically it's the Eldar. These are
Eldar with an A? Okay.
derived from the elves of many more fantasy games and are basically space elves. Despite this quite simplistic analogy, the Eldar have a rich and tragic lore. Because of past disasters that have left the Eldar with no homeworlds to speak of, they now travel the galaxy in vast ships known as craft worlds. The Eldar wield powerful weapons, but are generally physically weak, and they also have immense arrogance towards other races. Their defining feature, and to some degree their biggest flaw, is that the Eldar are very powerful when it comes to psykers and psychic abilities drawn from the warp. The Dark Eldar are essentially space pirates who
The dog. Wait, what? The Drokari. He said the dog elder.
live lives of excess and sadistic
Oh,
torture.
they renamed it. They renamed it. Okay.
Porn. Anyone who looks like they're about to
Wait.
who live lives of excess and sadistic torture porn.
What the?
Anyone who looks
what?
like they're about to be captured.
What? What he say? What he say? The Dark Elder are essentially space pirates who live
excess
lives.
and sadistic torture porn. Anyone who looks like they're about to be captured by the Dark Eldar is rarely something that you would want to contemplate, and suicide would generally be significantly preferable. A faction of many faces and contradicting goals, Chaos is as its name describes, and it originates from the parallel dimension known as the Warp. And this dimension is a reactive plane of existence that absorbs the most powerful emotions and desires of mortal creatures. The reactive immaterium would lead to the birth of entities of godlike power, the Chaos Gods. They each focus on specific mortal desires. Khorne is the god of blood, representing war.
This okay. They look hellish, and from the name Chaos, I think they comes from that. It's interesting.
Rage and hatred. Tzeentch is the changer representing ambition, scheming, conspiracy, and sorcery. Nurgle is the plague god representing mortality, morbidity, and despair. And Slaanesh is the god of lust, greed, excess, pleasure, pain, and perfection. The continuing desires and emotions of the galaxy's inhabitants sustain these entities. However, they also reach out into the mortal realm through their manifested entities made from the warp known as demons. And these hellish creatures are enough to send ordinary citizens insane on sight. They're backed by traitors to the Imperium, the corrupted Chaos Space Marines. The gods of chaos and their agents can also infect the minds of mortals, and often cults and worshippers may spring up on planets across the Imperium. This is again one reason why the Imperium of Man is so ruthless about purging heretics. While chaos itself in the material world appears as one enemy that simply wages war, it is in fact in an internal conflict within itself. Each of the chaos gods fights for domination.
Why? Okay. I think he might explain it later on. But why do they look like Space Marine? But with extra gothic on top of it. But that looks so cool though. Holy crap. Just Space Marine like on cracked.
It is in fact in an internal conflict within itself. Each of the Chaos Gods fights for domination over the others, and this occupies the majority of their focus and energy. Each god's ultimate goal is complete domination of the Immaterium, a goal which seems unattainable and dangerous to their own existence were it to come to pass. Chaos is one of the most varied and pervasive forces in 40k and has many forces operating under its banner, some dedicated to a specific god, others that simply worship chaos undivided. Now everybody knows the orcs, right? Middle-earth and all that crap. Not these orcs. These are more Mad Max Fury Road crossed with British football hooligans, and then you're in the right ballpark. Also in space. Space orcs are likely a genetically designed species focused for hyper-violence and to be almost impossible to permanently exterminate. They are as hilarious as they are dangerous, and their entire society focuses around casual violence. The orcs, though, are also probably the most sunny and optimistic of all races, strangely. Their genetic disposition sets them to see things as generally good and enjoyable, especially when it comes to fighting. And they never really see failure as a negative, because it means you just get to have another go later. They also operate...
Now that's a good mindset to have. Damn. Bro, I wish I have the orc mindset. We fail. We do it later.
more on instinct by design than learned knowledge, and their willpower becomes more powerful the more orcs are present, meaning when they are collected en masse, they can literally will things to be true by collective belief. They also have a strange ability to just cobble together vehicles and weapons from scrap. They also have no real governing structure. Leaders are chosen by progressively being better at smashing their rivals' heads in until an orc eventually reaches the position of being a war boss. When orcs collect in huge numbers, they may launch a massive campaign of raiding and attacking anything that's not orc by launching a warg, essentially a huge, no-holds-barred
Orc plus war equal walk? What a name! But I like it. Okay, so it seems like the orc is almost the same as the human in this case. Like they just destroy everything that is not them. Makes sense. I kind of like the orcs now.
slaughterfest. Anything in the way, best dig in or get the hell out. The Tau are one of the newer races and are fast learning that the galaxy is not a friendly place. The Tau operate similarly to the Orcs on a more optimistic level, but that's about as far as their common ground with the Orcs goes, because the Tau exist on the fringe of the Imperium and are unusual as they actively encourage other races to join their cause. They collectively follow an ideology known as the greater good. This is their guiding principle that working together is better than working against one another, as this leads to a stronger, more peaceful society. However, anybody who disagrees with this best prepare for war. To be fair though, the Tau do usually attempt significant levels of diplomacy before declaring their target a lost cause. Their military is...
This faction in particular feels very stalwart. I don't know if that's the term, but it feels like it comes out from the Star Wars lore universe.
Largely focused around technology and ranged combat, something often mocked and derided by their enemies. The Tau themselves are comparatively weak and use other races absorbed into their faction to fight in close quarters.
The Tyranids.
Tyranids are an unusual exception to all previous Xenos. They do not operate on an ideology, a political structure, or debatably a single leader. They are the most Xenos of Xenos and have begun...
So these are the Zerg, right? Because okay, I have so many comparisons to StarCraft right now. So the Space Marines is basically the Terran. The Protoss has some like similarities, but not so much. And the Tyranids is basically just the Zerg.
A steady invasion of the galaxy. They are presumed to have arrived from beyond the borders of the known galaxy and are hostile in the extreme. They do not wield any technology as we would understand it, or their ships, forces and weapons are biological in origin. Tyranids are one of the most nightmarish factions within 40k. Their singular goal is biomass, that is to strip planets of all biological and mineral materials, leaving them barren, dead husks. They assault planets with extreme prejudice and will not cease their assault unless they are damaged to a point where their acquisition of biomass becomes negative to that being expended. They use all material to birth their forces on their vast bioships and recycle their own units by dissolving them back into the pool of biomass, which then they draw to create anything else they may need. They absorb the genetics of all that they encounter and use this to evolve and create more hostile and efficient creatures and biomachines to achieve their goal. They may also seed and infect planets ahead of time to often use the planet's own inhabitants against themselves when the Tyranids arrive to destroy the world. The Tyranids are controlled en masse by something called the hive mind. This is essentially a broad...
But yeah, very similar to the Zerg. Almost the exact same thing. It's a hive mind. They conquer world by using like literally like the body amounts. Like the larger they are, like the more they are, like the more dangerous they are. Damn. So it's very StarCrafty. I don't know which one comes first. Like StarCraft did StarCraft come first and then Warhammer comes later, or is the opposite? Let me know.
Casted collective consciousness that enables them the powerful skill of being able to operate as one, but made up of millions of individual entities across a planet. The Tyranids are horrific, seemingly unstoppable, and have already wrought terrible destruction upon many others across the galaxy. Many rumour that their already devastating campaigns are only the initial scouting parties to the Milky Way galaxy, and if this is true, the Tyranids could be the ones to end everything. While not wanting to touch on the subject of psychic power too strongly in this video, many factions in 40k feature what are known as psychers. These are essentially individuals who can wield what you might describe in other universes as magic powers. Some factions have strong psychers and others have none, and these powers are drawn from the
So there's magic, but not really?
parallel dimension known as the warp or the immaterium. Individuals who can use these powers do so at considerable risk, as the warp is an unstable and dangerous realm. The relationship between real space and warp space is a complicated one and can affect many aspects of life in the far future, but this is something best covered in another video.
Okay.
The takeaway for you today is that Warhammer 40,000 is a world of vast-scale warfare and complex interfactional and internal factional power struggles. 40k is by its very nature often absurd to the extreme. Sometimes this can be somewhat detrimental to its own narrative, because when everything is supersized and extreme in the extreme, suddenly everything looks kind of the same, and then it becomes arguably less impressive. However, 40k just owns its own absurdity, and it's something that you just have to roll with and suspend your disbelief. For many who are obsessed with 40k, the hyper-violent, xenophobic, genocidal nature of its occupants is largely a source for much dark humour. Most people that are into Warhammer, they don't take it too seriously, but it is also fun to take things in 40k very seriously because it contains so much detail. But simultaneously, there are many memes and pure nonsensical comedy that comes from 40k because of just how extreme it is. The classic It Sounds Like Heresy being one such example, whereby anyone who dissents from the official line of thinking is declared a heretic and executed on the spot. It's one that I enjoy using all the time in the comments. And the key theme of 40k is purely about war. The lore is a vast, all-encompassing backdrop that stands on its own, but 40k for itself is all about the galactic wars that are unending. It's focused this way because it represents the background for a tabletop war game that is surprisingly about factional war. 40k itself operates on a fairly healthy dose of irony. Much of the events and organizations, forces and individuals often are the result of half-truths or pure indoctrination, and some of those that are held up as heroes are not what they appear to be, and as usual the context of events are very important, but many things can end up being actually quite subjective. The fact that the Imperium itself has, through its devout worship of the Emperor, now has its state religion embedded in almost everything it does, which is hilarious when you consider the Emperor of Man set out to eradicate religion from humanity entirely. Warhammer 40k draws from a lot of historical events and ideologies. It also borrows heavily from other settings like Dune, 2000 AD, Lovecraftian influence, obviously Tolkien, and even older texts like Milton's Paradise.
You know this? Okay, I know. I kind of understand why people really like Warhammer series. It's like a sandbox. Like it gives you the world, it gives you the character, it gives you like just a general concept of a storyline. Like Space Marine, alien bad. Orcs, like no orcs bad. And then the Necrons, we are metal, we are light, we invade other. Something like that. Like just enough storyline so that people can make their own. I think so. In a tabletop game. Okay. I'm not sure which one is my favorite though.
Lost and the Divine Comedy with Dante and the Inferno. 40k has continued to be fleshed out over time, and it shows no signs of abating. If anything, it's moving forward at a faster pace than ever. It is a universe that has consumed me for some 30 years, and I highly recommend that you allow the darkness of the far future to enter your life. You may live to regret it, but you will undoubtedly enjoy it. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, if you have a suggestion for what my next 40k primer should be,
this was a good video. Okay, now I want to look through like all the races. Sorry, all the factions, sorry. The Hobby. Oh no, that's not humanity. So we have okay, so we have the Xenos. So the Xenos kinda alien. Oh no, this he's just talking about. So the first one is the Necrons. I don't really like the Necrons. They feel too one note, I feel like. What, who knows? They could have something cool. The Elder. The Elder. I think this one I said that it looks very similar to Protoss, to the Protoss faction in StarCraft. Yeah, they do look like it. Yeah, like they are really into like the close quarter combats, I feel like. The chaos is absolutely amazing. Like just Space Marine on cracked. And then we have the Orcs. Orcs with a C or a K? With a K. Okay. Orcs are cool. Orcs are really cool. Like, but I don't think it's not for me though. Like they are. Hang on, I gotta hold my judgment before that. So that's the Orcs, the Tau. The Tau. No, Loetin said that it's a new fashions, and this that exactly comes from StarCraft. Tyranids, basically Berserk. Man, but I do see why people really like Space Marine, or in this case, the humanity. Space Marine, the Imperium, basically. This is interesting. Okay, next video. The Dark Beginnings, Necron, Old Ones and Elders. Okay, this one gonna be about the Necrons then.
This is Luton. Welcome to my new series exploring the universe of Warhammer 40,000. 40k is a vast and fascinating universe with lore so complicated you could spend literally weeks discussing it. So one of the most difficult choices for me was where to begin with it. Now, the universe of 40k is such a mass of cross-referenced nuances and interlinked stories of revenge, justice, hatred and brutality. It's like trying to explain the whole of human history to an alien race. So breaking the lore of 40k down into YouTube videos is quite a complicated matter. Now, one last thing to mention is that Games Workshop themselves have stated that in the 41st millennium, information is fragmented, intercepted, distorted, suppressed, and often flat out just false. So with this in mind, a lot of 40k lore, beyond stuff that you would consider out and out facts, can be regarded more as hearsay than something that's just set in stone. This is especially true of ancient lore and race histories. This is in part because it allows Games Workshop to make changes to the universe without upsetting devout players, but it also makes a lot of sense in reality where war has been
That's actually very clever. Like whoever designed the stories, like they live in that room so that you can change it for like the future generations or something happens. That's really very clever.
Raging since almost the beginning of time. Also, if you look at humanity, it's often true that history is written by the victors, and so with that in mind, you might expect some facts within the universe of 40k to be anything from an eyewitness account to complete misinformation, which then translates to becoming the gospel word as it's passed down through the ages.
Okay.
So where do we start our journey into the grim darkness of the 41st millennium? At the beginning, of course. We leave the Imperium of Mankind behind and travel some 60 million years before to the earliest time where one peaceful, hyper-advanced race were masters of their own destinies. These beings are simply referred to as the Old Ones, and they are, as far as recorded, the first sentient life in the universe. Their lives focused on the acquisition of knowledge and to seed the universe with life, terraforming and creating new species, including one.
Sounds like God. Is it? I think this is the Elder.
Unintelligent ape-like species on a small blue planet in the Milky Way.
Well, just us.
Now, very little specific details exist around the Old Ones themselves, but the story of their place in the grand scheme of things is where we will begin. Now, the Old Ones had great psychic powers and built many wonders of godlike beauty and size, and it was this vast understanding of the universe that allowed them to manipulate alternate dimensions and begin constructing their arguably greatest achievement, known as the Webway. Now, as its name describes, this is a web of pathways that allowed the Old Ones to travel through a vast sea of dimensional energy known as the Warp. The warp was a dangerous and disruptive expanse of powerful psychic energy, parallel to real space, although in the early times it was a lot more passive than it is in the 41st millennium, where it's extremely full of dark, horrific, chaotic energy. So to travel through it,
Okay, I will ask why. Okay, but I will let him to answer because I'm sure he will go through it later on.
though at this time it still required protected psychic pathways, and that's what they constructed. The webway enabled the Old Ones to travel across unimaginable distances at incredible speed, essentially crossing space that would take millennia comparatively instantaneously, enabling them to reach the far corners of the universe. They believed that all life was useful, and they are known to have brought about the rise of numerous important species and formed thousands of worlds, which they also made their own. As the Old Ones expanded, they encountered other advanced species, although none as far as themselves, once again remembering we are at this time millennia before the dawn of mankind. One such race the Old Ones happened across were known as the Necrontyr. The Necrontyr's planet of origin was barren. It was radiation blasted due to their violent nearby star, making their home incredibly hostile to life. Their bodies were riddled with radiation sickness, and they lived extremely short lives, constantly preparing for their inevitable deaths.
The fact that there is a life on that planet is amazing. Like biological life. Intelligent form of biological form. It's actually amazing. It's a miracle, I would say, because nothing can survive of radiations.
Their cities were built in anticipation of their demise, little more than vast tomb complexes with a few temporary homes for the living. Now, they vainly tried to improve their mortality through scientific means, but after centuries they were consigned to the fact that their bodies could not be changed to survive on their home planet. Somehow though, despite this, they altered their plans to instead reach to the stars in a bid to escape their cursed cyclical fate of painful, unending death. And this is where they were to encounter the Old Ones. However, while the Old Ones were able to travel anywhere in space in mere steps and possessed near immortal length of life, the Necrontyr could not have been more opposite. They had to use slow-moving, non-warp-ready ships equipped with stasis crypts that enabled the short-lived crew to survive out amongst the stars. They clad their ships in living metal, which was a metal.
So it's very similar to the cryosis, the cryo booth chamber for the human race. Okay, but how short their lifespan is? Like when you talk about short, how short it is? Like 2 years, 3 years, but the fact that they still can build they still be able to reach space level engineering is actually amazing. Okay.
Literally that grows and lives like that of an organic material, and this was to allow it to withstand the rigours of spaceflight. Despite this though, colonization for the Necrontyr was a slow and painful process, as was everything in their history. But upon meeting the Old Ones and seeing their secrets of near immortality sparked a hope was raised within the Necrontyr. They finally saw a chance to be saved from their pain, a chance to live. And they petitioned the Old Ones for the secret of eternal life, but were refused this knowledge. In many ways, this refusal of knowledge doomed the universe to its fate of unending war and the events that were to follow. The Necrontyr burned with the resentment and hatred of the Old Ones and their unwillingness to save them from their pain and suffering. In addition to this, the Necrontyr Empire were battling brutal civil wars known as the Wars of Secession, which the various dynasties of Necrontyr were battling one another. The encounter with the Old Ones led the Triarch, the ruling council over all the Necrontyr, believed that an external foe would unify their species, and their bitterness to the Old Ones led to war, and it worked. The prospects of vast spoils and the secret to immortality brought the Necrontyr dynasties together to launch their campaign against the Old Ones. Their hopes, however, were typically short-lived, as the Necrontyr were unable to match or outmaneuver the Old Ones, whose use of the webway enabled them to always reinforce, preempt and win battles against the Necrontyr. Eventually, conceding defeat, the Necrontyr were forced to retreat to their homeworlds, defeated and, importantly, more bitter and full of hatred for the Old Ones than ever before. At this time, the Old Ones forgot about the Necrontyr. They'd been vanquished. But
there's no way the Necron can, fight one-on-one with the Elders, right? There's no way. The Elders literally created them. There's no way the Necron could win.
But the Necrontyr had no intention of dying out so silently. Instead, they redoubled their efforts to find new weapons to destroy the Old Ones and achieve what they sought so passionately, the secret to immortality. During their research for new weapons, they became aware of creatures living from the destructive solar radiation from their sun. These life forms were named the Satan, star gods in the...
Satan? Satan? Is it the same? Is it written the same way as Satan? Satan.
Necrontyr's language. Now, the Satan at this early time were not particularly aware of anything beyond their need to absorb raw energy and power. Their godlike energy seemed nearly invincible to the Necrontyr, the perfect weapon to unleash against the Old Ones, but if only they could harness that power. And they did through their living metal. They constructed bodies, empty husks, shells for the Satan to inhabit. And it's unknown how they contacted the Satan initially, but through some means they encouraged the Satan to take physical form using the living metal bodies that were constructed. Now, a Satan known as the Deceiver spoke with Zarek, the Silent King, Lord of the Necrontyr Triarch, and told him how long ago the Old Ones and Satan had also been at war, but the Satan were defeated and scattered. This common foe brought the Necrontyr and Satan to a close alliance, and the Necrontyr began to worship them as gods for their supreme power.
Okay.
But as the Satan, once without conception of the world around them, became more manifest and intelligent, it was clear they were not the salvation that had been hoped for. The Satan offered Zarek an offer for his race: immortality. But this was not to be the immortality of the Old Ones, but that of living metal shells that they had created for the Satan. They proposed that a great period of biotransference would take place to give all Necrontyr that which they craved most: unending life. In his desperation for victory, glory and immortality, the Necrontyr Zarek agreed to transfer all other Necrontyrs into living metal bodies, that their flesh would be destroyed, but their minds and essence would live forever. This, however, was the biggest tragedy ever to befall the Necrontyr.
Oh?
Their minds were dulled to that of soulless drones, and only a few leaders maintained some semblance of their former selves, including Zarek. And it was at this time that Zarek realized he had made a terrible, terrible...
So basically, right? I think that Satan is literally Satan. The Necrontyr was making a deal with the devil. The devil say, okay, you want immortality? We're gonna give you. We're gonna put you inside a metal body. And the mind the Satan said that the mind is gonna be the same. That I guess the soul wasn't there. Like Satan be like, oh, I forgot the soul, and then I think that's why the Necrons becomes lifeless and dull.
And it was at this time that Zarek realized he had made a terrible, terrible mistake and doomed his entire race. The Satan turned the Necrontyr into slaves, ruling over them with extreme disregard and cruelty. The Necrontyr were extinguished from the universe forever, and the time of the Necrons had begun. But worse was still to come. We now return to the Old Ones, who during this time were largely unaware of the Necrontyr's demise or the resurrection of their ancient enemy, the Satan. This ignorance would prove catastrophic, as the Old Ones were left with no time to prepare an adequate defense against one of the most destructive wars in the history of the entire universe, known in the ancient history of the 41st millennium as the War in Heaven. So named, it was a war literally between gods and on a scale of unimaginable proportions, making the wars between races in the current time of Warhammer 40,000 seem like mere skirmishes.
Wait, hang on. This from League. This is not from Warhammer. What the fuck? This is... Wait. Okay. Okay, bro. I guess he couldn't find like a good image of the Necron like rising up. And I think yeah, this is a good representation of it.
Skirmishes by comparison. This war against the Old Ones was very different to the first. The Necrons not only had more advanced weaponry, they now were protected in their immortal living metal form, and the Old Ones' mastery of the warp and webways was continually countered by the C'tan with their immense power over the material universe. In this time, the C'tan spread out like vicious predators, consuming entire worlds, feasting on the creations of the Old Ones, who now retreated to only their strongest bastions to plan a way out of complete annihilation. And all the while, entire worlds were razed, suns extinguished, and entire star systems devoured by the uncontainable C'tan. The Old Ones had now retreated to the webway, only venturing out when it was essential. But even these once impenetrable paths were not untainted by the fury of the Necron. Facing complete extinction, the Old Ones seeded new life they hoped would protect them. These new races would have powerful psychic abilities to defend against the C'tan. The early creations were the Eldar, the Knib and the Rashan, and whilst the Eldar would live through to the current time, almost nothing is known of the fate of the Knib or the Rashan, and it's entirely possible they were destroyed completely by the C'tan and Necrons, with only the Eldar surviving this early time. Among their other creations were also those which would become mankind, beasts that lived in their own ecosystem but had no specific role defined for them by the Old Ones and were left to their own natural evolution. During these ancient times, the Eldar learnt a great many secrets of the warp from the Old Ones, who regularly visited them, mentoring them on how to control their psychic powers and learn to use the warp. Eldar legends originating from this time state that they were raised by figures of shadow and light, referring to them as First Ones. It is said they were the first to have reached into the starry night and to be older than gods, yet mortal and subject to time. They are said to have left the Eldar and returned to the sky in order to allow their charges to develop over millennia. They would return later in strange, vast vessels, but that were worn and scarred. This was of course due to them being engaged in an unending war against the C'tan, with the Old Ones returning to inspect the Eldar and judge if they were fit for the war ahead. The Old Ones are known to have aided their younger race in focusing their psychic abilities to create warp-derived entities and use them as weapons against the vampiric gods of starlight, which of course is a reference to the C'tan. Now the Eldar...
I feel like the Elder was a bunch of morons. They started this war. They make this happen. What the hell? They literally created the war in the Warhammer. Oh my god. Just because they said no. Oh, of course they will say no, but hey man, what's up? Welcome to the stream. I couldn't stream it on Twitch because Streamlabs is having problems again, and my PC hasn't been fixed. So yeah. What have you done? Your brain gonna get invested into by the lore, and my wallet will disappear after this. But yeah, I'm on my second video right now, so yeah, it's gonna be fun. So far, I think at the moment I have no perfection yet. I'm learning about the Necrons, and I feel like the Old Ones, aka the Elder, is I think they are the same. They're dumb. They started everything.
Legends continue stating that in the time of the First Ones, now dwindling in number to the point that they lost influence among the Eldar. And without their creators' sensibility and guidance, the Eldar's psychic creations, born from the warp itself, changed from sentient weapons into living gods of the Immaterium, who were the very, very first of their kind. And this change instigated not only the final catastrophe for the First Ones, but in time would come back to haunt the Eldar themselves with apocalyptic consequences. The war in heaven continued, and by the time the Old Ones had prepared their forces, there were only 4 C'tan in existence. But swathes of other life forms in the galaxy the Old Ones had seeded were already extinguished.
Ooh.
The Old Ones finally unleashed the new races, sending the Necrons reeling as the power of the warp was an anathema to them, and they struggled to contain the advance of this new offensive. In response, the C'tan unified for the first time in millions of years. However, now a new and devastating unforeseen side effect of the Old One's creations began to manifest in this period as the young race's psychic development disturbed the energies of the warp itself. And from this pure energy came mass and form, and older warp entities became predatory as the warp began to become a more hostile environment. Cracks in reality would appear, and the entities of the warp saw entry into the material universe, forcing the Old Ones again to bring about the emergence of new species to defend their final strongholds. They were now under assault from so many different directions, they barely...
Why do they keep making new species, bro? Stop! They keep digging the hole deeper and deeper and wider. Bro. It's not cool. But I like it so far. I think that's also the reason why of the warps. I think the chaotic nature of the warps breed the chaos factions. I think so. It's like an alternate dimensions. The alternate version of the Space Marine. So would you pay some merchandise for Warhammer? Not yet. I want to learn more about like the war itself first. It's like in order to watch Avengers movie, you need to see 10 years worth of Marvel main movies and spin-offs. Yeah, exactly. But I have a whole playlist here. And it would take us like 7 days to watch it all. So yeah, let's try to watch as many of them as we can in today's streams.
Had anywhere left to turn. Among their creations included the green-skinned ultra-violent Croc, later known as Orcs, and the technologically adept Jakiro. Now though, the Old Ones, even with their vast knowledge of creation and their near immortal lifespan, had run out of time. With their interstellar network being breached, their greatest work and places of power being overrun by the horrific beings of the warp, tragically it manifested by the very creations that they had formed to save them. Among the most insidious of these entities were the Enslavers, who penetrated and dominated the minds of the younger races in order to open portals for themselves to the material universe. The plague of enslavers was the final blow for the Old Ones, who were scattered forever, their power and knowledge destroyed. The combination of an unending onslaught from the C'tan combined with the mistakenly unleashed warp horrors led to the Old Ones' complete destruction. The surviving C'tan and Necrons had the final pleasure of seeing the demise of their most bitter enemy. Now after the destruction of the Old Ones, Zarek, lord of the former Necron tier Triarch as you all remember, was left biding his time, waiting until the time was right to strike and lead a Necron revolt against the C'tan. The Necrons focused the unimaginable energies of the living universe into cataclysmic weapons created from all their amassed knowledge that were too devastating for even the C'tan, the godlike C'tan, to endure. And these C'tan, near gods, almost impossible to destroy entirely due to their very nature, were instead shattered across the universe into energy shards. Zarek now saw that having destroyed the C'tan, the remaining new races created by the Old Ones, such as the Eldar, were becoming more powerful, knowledgeable and dominant. The Necrons, exhausted by eons of war, could not stand against them. So rather than risk certain annihilation, he ordered that the Necrons withdraw into their tomb worlds and slumber in the Great Sleep, to reawaken 60 million years in the future and assert their dominance over the galaxy once more. The Silent King, however, did not join his people in slumber. He destroyed a protocol that allowed him to control over the Necron race and journeyed out into the void of intergalactic space, where he may not find solace but instead penance for dooming the Necrontier race in his deal with the now vanquished C'tan. It was rumoured that the final Old One survived destruction from the C'tan and Necrons. This survivor hid away where he continued his old ways of tweaking, dabbling and prodding around. Now we'll discuss about what he may have been doing in future content. When he was done with his work, he departed into the warp in order to hide and watch as the Old Ones knew the warp intimately. As the Necrons now retreated into stasis until this time of cataclysm had ended, the lesser creations of the Old Ones, such as mankind, continued their own paths of development, to eventually rise as powerful forces in their own right. The mantle of galactic dominion would now pass to the Eldar, but the Eldar would survive where the Old Ones did not, and would see the last Necrons depart into their great sleep after they had turned on the C'tan. Now that concludes our history of the Old Ones in Warhammer 40,000. This really is the foundation for all events that would follow and sets a lot of facts and implications into future events. So join me next time as we discover what the Eldar do with 60 million years of time.
So this is interesting. So this like the start of everything, right? And well, according to the timeline, from what I understand right now, the Necron is still asleep. In the meantime, the Space Marine, the Orcs, the whatever, the other factions, they are still like growing to the state to where they are right now. And then during that time, the Necrons awakes. And yeah, okay, I see what's going. How's reading the lore? I don't like reading. I cannot read, so yeah. Let's see what the comments say. Old ones create multiple species. Hang on, you guys can see it. Old ones create multiple species. Species fight an endless war against each other. Old ones, hey, you weren't supposed to do that. Yeah. Warhammer summarize. However, the worst was still to come. Oh my god. Tell the saddest story ever to come out about an entire race being tricked to become a solar spectral slave robots. But worse was still to come. Oh my god. Damn, bro. Okay. Interesting. Okay, next one. The Elder. The rise and fall. Wait, so the rise and fall of an empire. 9 years ago, by the way. 9 years. How are we doing on time? That's just 2 videos and we already like there's so much time already. Man, I just wish Twitch is doing a better job at keeping the server and stuff, because I could not even stream on it. It's very annoying to do. I don't know how the makers would create the game with Switch law, which is unbelievable. I think like in the first video we watched, Lewis said that like the creator, they just give them like a faction, a character, a general storyline for the tabletop game, and because it is a tabletop game, by definitions, people will insert their own storyline into it, and because of that, you create a very expensive world because people just keep adding stuff into it, and everything is to the extreme, like heretics and something, those things like that. And yeah, and over time, I think it just expands even more. I actually don't know what the difference between like Warhammer and Warhammer 40k. So let's watch this. The grim darkness of the far future. There's only one war. The Warhammer?
The Eldar. Created by the Old Ones, who were the most knowledgeable beings in the universe, but were destroyed in a fanatical genocide by the Necrons and C'tan. The Eldar stood victorious, the unlikely benefactors in a war of unimaginable proportions, and now found their race in complete dominion of the known universe. Now, just to mention again, as I did on the previous video, that the time we are dealing with here, as with much of the history in the 40k universe, is near speculation at best. After millions of years, facts and history are inclined to become cloudy. The Eldar history is one steeped in mythology and legend, so it's fair to say that you could lend some artistic license around the events of this period. As the lore of 40k is also very complicated, we'll learn today about the ancient history of the Eldar up to the 41st millennium. I'll then cover their race of the current period in a separate video. The war in heaven was over, and the Eldar stood unopposed in the universe. In this time we're speaking of the ancient Eldar. This is an important distinction to make between the modern Eldar of the 41st millennium. Ancient Eldar held a different mindset and outlook on their lives, and with good reason. Reason that we'll look at in due course. The ancient Eldar had...
So interesting. So there are two type of elders then. Like the old one, the old ones created the old elders. And then what's about the new one then?
Been crafted and refined by the old ones for one purpose alone, and that was to destroy their enemy with vast psychic ability. It is possible that the Eldar gods spoken of at this time were actually weapons created by the old ones for them to wield. This is the version that I subscribe to. As a result of their naturally powerful psychic ability from the old one's intelligent design, the Eldar are gifted with also unnaturally long lives by humanoid standards and intellects which would enable them to create some of the most precious and complex technological advances in the universe. The next events are particularly confusing. In essence, the Eldar gods, which it appears were initially immense psychic weapons created by the ancient Eldar with guidance from the old ones. They became living gods, such was their immense psychic energy and connection to the Eldar. The Eldar of the current day seem to have lost through the mists of time and their mythology this fact that the gods they worship were potentially created by themselves, albeit in their earliest, most ancient form, either directly or indirectly. Each of the gods was known to gift the Eldar a trait and be part of their development. Eldar mythology states that Azuran gave the Eldar wisdom so that they may know themselves. Isha gave the Eldar love so they may know one another. Vol gave the Eldar the artifice as a means to make their dreams become realities. Lilith gave the Eldar joy so they'd be happy in their lives. Kurnus gave them the ability to desire so that they would prosper. Muraheg gave the Eldar foresight so that they would know their place in the world. And lastly, Cain gave the Eldar anger so that they may have a means to defend their gifts. It then becomes even more complicated though. The Eldar in their legends refer to a time of war between their own gods as the war in heaven. Now this is
Okay, the war in heaven, we know that is between the Satan, the Necrons, and the old ones. Okay.
Confusing, as you remember that the war between the old ones, Necron and Satan, is also referred to as the war in heaven. Now it seems likely that these events occurred during a period of cataclysmic war across the universe, and at the same time have caused this period to have a blurred point of reference. Now when you consider this is all meant to have taken place some 60 million years ago, it seems very feasible that this would occur. The Eldar have focused more on their own gods in this time than the events between the Old Ones and Necron-Satan alliance, given that the Eldar lost respect and communication with the Old Ones during the war. This would make sense, and that they potentially could lose some information about the period through the vast timescale and various events that have befallen them.
Okay, this in the previous video as well, like a lot of the story, a lot of like plot points, they are speculations, unconfirmed, or just outright lies. Well, in the universe itself, it makes sense because we are talking about 60 million years, and of course, and the history is always written by the victors, so it makes sense. But for the creator themselves, again, I said it before, it's a very clever way to give them space for them to rewrite certain stories so that it makes sense in future generations. I think that's just very clever. I think that's how League of Legends does it as well.
Instead, they're focusing on the mythological aspect and their own gods, which are arguably of much more importance to the collective Eldar consciousness. The legend of the Eldar gods is very much one of mythology, so I'll cover that in a smaller subsidiary video. What I will say is that there was a period of strife amongst the Eldar gods pantheon. You'll hear that word a lot in reference to the Eldar gods. It simply refers to a council or circle. Think of the Greek gods of Olympus.
Okay.
Now, this dark period of bloodshed and war was not just among the gods, but also against the Eldar themselves. This not only divided the Eldar from their gods, ceasing their ability to guide them. This period was a disaster in many ways, but the whole series of events was caused by a misreading of foresight borne by one of the gods. Now, this miscalculation, in my opinion, actually doomed not only the gods themselves, but also the entire Eldar race. And I'll elaborate on all this in a future mythology video and what its implications were. Now, as I said,
what? Oh, sorry, that was very loud. That was very loud. But why, bro? You are literally God. Why do you make such a stupid mistake, bro?
said before, the origin of the Eldar gods is one of speculation, but I believe that these were weapons gifted by the Old Ones, or at least guided in creating them for the Eldar, and were masses of incredible psychic power. But when eventually the Eldar were left without the influence of the Old Ones, who had by then been extinguished, these masses changed from mere weapons to sentient life forms, the gods of Eldar civilization. Remembering that these powers were first created to combat the Satan, gods powerful enough to devour stars themselves, it stands to reason that the psychic weapons created for or by the ancient Eldar could transition to powerful entities within the Eldar race, given their immense psychic force. Whilst we refer to them as weapons, it is not to say necessarily that they would have just been offensive. They could have been shielding, protective, or informative. And given the specific nature and description of each of the Eldar gods, I'm inclined to think that this is the case, and that these so-called weapons each had a function to bolster the Eldar in combating essentially what was an invincible army. So just to recap, during the earliest days of the Eldar, the Old Ones had helped them to develop and craft their psychic powers, knowledge, and skills. Over time though, and because of the war in heaven, the Eldar were left more and more to themselves to develop and advance. When the Old Ones were destroyed, they were at the point where they left entirely to forge their own way forward in the universe. After the war in heaven, that was the war of unimaginable proportions. Once that finished, and the Eldar had defeated the Necrons, the Satan was shattered across the universe by the Necrons, who then retreated into their tomb worlds, leaving the Eldar as the most powerful force in the universe.
Okay, so the Old Ones created the Elder. The Elder kind of somewhat basically they against their creators, and now they just become the most powerful force in the universe. Okay.
With forces able to crush any who opposed them. An obvious comparison to this would be the Roman Empire in its advancement and strength over any other society at this time. Now, this situation obviously leaves the Eldar in an advantageous position in terms of societal advancement and growth. And grow they did, both in their technology, population, and most importantly their collective psychic power. Another problem at this time for the Eldar would be their gods, who were powerful psychic creatures and had up until now aided and guided the Eldar. Some of the more powerful ancient Eldar, like the earliest of their race, spoke to these gods in first-person terms and even fought against them. But all of this was to end. The gods were no longer entities that were able to assist and help shape the Eldar as they once had. Now they could only be contacted through spirit stones and help guide them in a much less
Whoa. Spirit stones? Where does it come from? Huh? Hang on. And also, I just want to make sure your ears won't get blown up. I will add a limiter, just so that you guys don't get blown away. Okay, yeah, I'm testing microphone. Okay, this will be good.
So the Eldar would now enter a period of previously unequaled growth, a golden age in which they would spread their knowledge and culture wider than any that had gone before it. Such was their own dominance that over millennia they filled themselves with a great arrogance, a sense that all other races were below them, and all around them stood evidence of this, both in their technological success, their psychic powers, the beauty with which they...
Okay, he keeps showing this particular model of the character. This girl, this woman, whatever. What's up with her? Is he the all-powerful or something? This particular character keeps coming up every time we mention the Elder.
They inhabited new worlds far and wide. They were at the pinnacle of achievement, both technologically, culturally, and in the size of their empire. They not only lived long lives, but when they did die, their souls would return to the collective ether to be reborn into a new body, a psychic reincarnation. This enabled the Eldar to achieve a height of cultural technology that would nor could ever be equaled again. Over the vast periods of time involved here, literally millions of years, the Eldar reigned supreme. Their strength, pride, arrogance, and avarice grew. Their sensibility and self-control waned and became less and less.
Interesting.
Their race was so advanced that they no longer needed to perform any physical or menial tasks, nor did they need to work to support their society. Their only causes were either self-betterment, the pursuit of knowledge, and most often of all, to indulge their desires, no matter how extreme. Now, whilst this may seem a deplorable thing, you must remember that the Eldar have far more powerful and overbearing emotions than humans, and this would lead them to indulging in ever more perverse ways to satisfy their desires, both through violence, cruelty, torture, sex, depravity. It became harder and harder for these extreme fanatics dedicated to dark pleasures to satisfy their decadent desires. So their acts became more violent and more creative. Soon, the streets were literally running with blood, and the insane bloodlusting roar of the swathes of citizens could be heard throughout the Eldar Empire. Now, as you become desensitized to something over time, you have to push it further and further to achieve any enjoyment from it at all. And the Eldar in their lives, where they had literally nothing other to do at this time than pleasure addiction, was like a disease infecting the whole of the Eldar race. The Eldar slaughtered one another at the slightest whim and feasted on the corpses of their fellow kin.
Okay, Eldar has turned a very... The storyline is becoming really dark. Not like it's already dark, but I mean like really dark. I guess this is what they meant when they say Dark Elder. Man, Elder, man, what's wrong with you?
All the while, the world burned around them. Cults dedicated to nightmarish depravity grew rapidly across the Eldar society. Whole lands fell to the different aspects of arcane knowledge and sensual excesses. Billions upon billions of Eldar, numbers greater than you can possibly imagine, spread across worlds throughout the universe, all cascading towards the darkest epitome of emotional worship. Even before this time, it had been prophesied that the Eldar would fall. The Old Ones warned the Eldar about it, but their predictions and warnings were forgotten, dismissed, and ignored over time. However, it is not to say that all was a hopeless mess of suffering and exorbitant pleasures. Whilst many had slid into chasms of depravity, there were many who focused still on improvement, development, and the core tenets of the Eldar race. Discoveries by the Imperium of Man have found hints at just how far the Eldar had advanced with their technology. One of these ancient devices enabled the user to literally will anything they could imagine into existence, drawing on their vast psychic powers. If you could imagine legions of Eldar Guardians that would appear and be real and physical and have mass, you could build endless streams of fleets, even whole cities. Whatever your imagination could be, you could create it using this highly advanced device. But on discovery of this device, it was deemed unusable. It had been tainted by the forces of chaos, of darkness.
This is where the chaos comes into play. Oh god. So this particular device, I feel like, okay, it's just a magical device where it just creates everything. And through that everything, it created chaos. Because, well, I guess to the whole story about yin and yang, right? When there's order, there's gonna be chaos. So when the elder tried to create something in order, chaos emerged. I don't know if the story actually follows that or not, but let's see.
The idea of using such a device of such devastating power that whilst it had been touched by chaos is an unthinkable one for the Imperium. It goes to show though just how far the Eldar had developed, and who knows what other advantages of similar genius they had created but have since lost. This period of wonder and decadence, however, could not last. Some saw it coming, although perhaps not quite understanding the gravity of what was to come. A group of Eldar known as Exodites concluded that the Eldar had grown to disgusting excess, and so left the homeworlds to live on fringe planets in a more sustainable, pure existence. At this time, a great many more of the Eldar began to grow uneasy with the numbers and severity of the degradation of their society. Their seers, who had powerful precognition, warned that this dark path would lead surely to evil and suffering for the entire race. Yet more Eldar left the homeworlds of their empire, considering the remaining society unsalvageable and beyond help. They built great starships so massive they were near artificial planets. These are referred to as craft worlds. Some of the strongest Eldar stayed on the homeworlds to selflessly try and alter the path their race had taken, believing it to be not too late to save their society of beauty from whatever horrors would lay ahead. Surely the Eldar could not be destroyed. How could the Guardians of the Galaxy fall when they had the most advanced technology, the most knowledge and power? So you see, the ancient Eldar had drifted from guidance by the Old Ones too early. And despite the warnings from the Old Ones, the sense of what could happen was never truly instilled into them. This, combined with the fact that their own gods took over as the primary religion within the Eldar, meant they lost and ignored the truth of what they could face if they did not control their extremely powerful emotions. Remember that the Eldar were created for one purpose: to destroy the Necrons and Satan through the use of psychic power and warp manipulation. They all have a powerful link to the warp, this parallel dimension of malleable energy.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that. Like, the old ones created the Elder for the sake of, okay, destroy the Necrons for me. So can they teleport? Can they use the warp? That's my question.
Over millions upon millions of years of sliding towards depravity, the Eldar's psychic emanations began to create form. This was continually added to and strengthened as things became progressively worse in the Eldar Empire. Souls of departed Eldar cultists and sacrifices forming a massive ball of negative psychic energy. This would cause such an imbalance within the warp dimension, it would actually create the immense psychic storms which humanity at this time would define as the Age of Strife. Without understanding it, they actually had a massive effect on other races at the time. The Eldar still had their webways to travel through the universe, but for any other races, interstellar travel and communication was rendered impossible by the high level of disturbance in the warp energy. This would last for millions of years and a hugely disruptive event for many other races. So, thanks for that, Eldar. But despite the most selfless efforts of the strongest Eldar back on Homeworld, and the cause for the endless emotional excesses to end, it barely abated. It became worse and worse, a downward spiral of disastrous proportions. Now, to any big society, this kind of horrific abuse would be a problem, but it was worse than could have been imagined for the Eldar. This mass of psychic energy that had been growing in the warp was now to reach a point of criticality. It would explode as it transformed inert psychic energy to a living consciousness of pure hate, suffering and decadence, a reflection of the Eldar's millions of years of societal abuse and hedonism given nightmarish form. The psychic scream of the birth of Slaanesh was to be so powerful it would literally rip the fabric of the universe in two. It tore the souls of the Eldar within 1,000 light years, slaughtering the greatest number of Eldar in an instant. No one knows the figures involved in this loss, but it could be no less than trillions of lives, not to mention all of their homeworlds, and some of the craftworlds who had not even travelled far enough were annihilated in an instant.
Oh shit.
Their research and technology destroyed, the wonders in their culture which had stood for millennia obliterated. The Eldar gods, who despite being separated from the Eldar still cared and protected their followers, tried to combat and defeat Slaanesh, but all were slain or shattered, apart from just a couple of their gods who managed to escape the horror. The Eldar had truly lost everything in an instant. Only those who sheltered at distance in the wraithbone hulls of the craft worlds and
So the people, the elders that went into the craft worlds, the spaceship, was the smart one.
like planets were spared, leaving a mere fragment of the Eldar behind. The Eldar race did not just fall at this time, it was nearly wiped from existence. The only other survivors were ironically the Dark Eldar. I'll make mention of this specific Eldar group another time, but the Dark Eldar were essentially a cult or a mix of cults who worshipped the most purely depraved side of the Eldar. They were part of the many who orchestrated the fall of the Eldar. They had created a home for themselves within the Eldar webway, and this protected them from the immense shockwave as Slaanesh came into being. But this was only the beginning. The horror of
What you mean it's the beginning? It's only went to shit, bro.
Would not only haunt the Eldar for many millennia, but it would also unleash unseen nightmares into the reality of the world. Until this time, dark forces from within the warp could only transition to reality by channeling themselves through a psyker or being summoned as so. With the warp and reality torn apart, these two now merged, and the horrors of the warp could easily bleed into the material universe, corrupting, destroying and ravaging. It is also said that the Eldar homeworlds still exist, lost within the realm of the warp and chaos, suffering a never-ending nightmare of their own making of pure, demonic suffering for any Eldar who remain there. The tear in the warp dimension in reality would be known from this point onward as the Eye of Terror, and gave birth to the gateway for the myriad of forces known as Chaos. This devastating event had a wide-reaching effect on all races in the galaxy, and was far from over in the history of the universe of 40k. Since this time of darkness, which the Eldar refer to as the Fall, it is spoken of understandably with sadness and humiliation. The Eldar are now broken and a scattered race, lacking a sense of unity and coordinated objective. The Exolite world saw all of these events confirm that their choice to abandon the ways of technology and hedonism was the right one, and consequently they've slipped into a more primitive technological level of subsistence and just existence. Happy in its simplicity and with no interest for the power that caused their destruction. The survivors of the Eldar homeworlds who had foresight enough to abandon their planets now drift through the stars in colossal nomad fleets, and the more strict and organised of these are the craft worlds. Created prior to the fall with the mission to preserve the true Eldar way of life, they are loaded with life forms, culture from their planet in both religion, biology, technology and politics. Each of these craft worlds remains independent of the others, and they have no commitments to one another. They will often ally one another in times of need, but their society is very much shattered from the days of the ancient Eldar and is just a shadow of its former glory. The process of reincarnation that the Eldar once revered is also no longer possible, as they discovered after the fall that Slaanesh would snatch and devour their souls at the point of death. This prospect brings utter terror to the Eldar, where once they did not fear death, as they knew their spirit would be reincarnated and their life's knowledge preserved, now it could be ripped and consumed by the chaos god Slaanesh. To counter this horror, the Eldar developed spirit stones. These are the red orbs you'll see adorning Eldar armor, vehicles and weapons. The purpose is to absorb and store an Eldar soul at the point of death, so that it can be then placed into a craftworld infinity circuit as a life source of information for the Eldar, and to save that soul from Slaanesh, ever watching, always desiring. Now
would that be like a double-edged sword? Because right, if you put every let's say an elder died, and we put like all the memories, all the informations into that specific spirit stones, right? And you store that in, and the Slanesh could easily go and invade it and just take it, like just outright take it. So, but yeah, I'll be just because of a nightmare or of a fear. I don't know if that's true or not. That could be true, and yeah, this definitely a double-edged sword situation there.
The Eldar have been greatly changed by the fall, and their society is still reeling from the sheer scale of the horror it created for itself. And all the while Slanesh is constantly stalking, they can never escape, and that's what they fear more than anything. But Eldar prophecies state, though, that one day their gods, some of whom were consumed and destroyed by Slanesh, others were lost long ago during the Eldar War in Heaven. It is said that they will one day rise again as the saviours of the Eldar, to see them take their place as the rulers of the galaxy once again. Whilst this might seem a hope of a doomed race, it's not out of the realms of possibility. The Eldar are one of the most powerful races when it comes to psychic powers, and the Eldar gods, as you remember, were weapons designed by the Old Ones to combat the Satan. So it's not somehow out of the realm of possibility that there's some truth to this. The Eldar gods could recombine, resurrect from the depths of the warp. If it were to happen, then perhaps this period of ruin among the Eldar would be viewed more as penance than actually as ruin. Now, the Eldar had been shattered by these events and were left significantly weakened. To date, their fall had the largest impact obviously on themselves. But it's worth to keep in mind that the Eldar were the ones who originally caused the Necrons to retreat into their tomb worlds. They had since then grown in strength many times over. But since the fall, all of this was lost, leaving them significantly weaker and more scattered than ever at the end of the War in Heaven. This could still have far-reaching consequences as the universe of the 41st millennium faces new threats from the awakening Necron and the invasive Tyranid hives. The Eldar's story is one which is far more significant than sometimes is given credit, and whilst many other empires are stronger than the Eldar in the current time, none are even close to what the Eldar had achieved with their own. The reality of the other younger and less powerful races such as mankind, Tau, Orcs, facing some of the most nightmarish forces in the universe is a sobering prospect. The Eldar, if their prophecies of godlike resurrection and intervention prove accurate, could be the last true hope for the universe. We'll be moving on from the Eldar now to look at mankind and the Imperium and their place in the universe.
Which is a good one then.
But we will revisit the Eldar.
Okay, so that's a good one then. Okay, I think we will save that for the next stream. That was a very good opening segments. Let's see what the comments say. The thing I like about 40k is that history is almost the sentient races in the universe, just one big perpetual tragedy. You don't get that in Star Wars or Star Trek. That makes sense though. Like everything just killing itself. So for this franchise seems greatly hammer deficient. Like there's no mention of a hammer. Oh my god. Okay, that was a very good opening segments. Next one we're gonna go into the Emperor Man, which has 4 parts in it. So this is gonna be fun. And yeah, so I hope you enjoy the stream. Please subscribe if you like my over analyze aspect. And yeah, next time I will try to fix my PC. Let's try to stream on Twitch and YouTube as well, because for some reason it doesn't work now. But yeah, hope you all have a good day. See you in the next stream. Bye bye.